Sometimes a revolution can be made in a simple gesture. Just imagine you're dining alone in a fancy restaurant, stuck in a routine with an expensive dish in front of you, and then a humble single mother appears, holding a baby in her arms, asking for leftovers from your meal. It's hard to imagine that something so small can trigger a life-changing experience, right? But that's exactly what happened to Heitor Damasceno, a millionaire marked by a profound family loss, whose life dragged on in solitude. What seemed like just another lonely dinner at the Eleganza restaurant turned into a turning point. And don't think this is just another sad story. This is about humanity, dignity, and reconnecting with what really matters. If you've ever doubted that a stranger can change your life, or that social media can both destroy and restore reputations, get ready. This true story will touch your emotions, and maybe, just maybe, make you look at the invisible people around you differently. Heitor Damasceno was not just a millionaire known for the imposing buildings of Damasceno Engenharia. He was a broken man inside. The loss of his wife and son in a devastating accident had transformed his life into a silent theater of repetitions. Eating at the Eleganza restaurant was yet another soulless ritual, where the expensive dish was just an excuse to avoid facing the emptiness of the apartment. Routine was his hiding place: work, medication, shallow sleep, and no connections. But that night, something different happened. A young single mother, Vittoria, appeared with a baby in her arms, courage in her eyes and dignity in her gesture. She asked for the leftovers from Heitor's plate, without shame, without drama, just a direct, human request. That image cut through Heitor's coldness like a hot knife through butter. It was as if time had stopped, and something inside him, locked away for years, began to move. That baby's name was Breno, and without saying a word, he too looked at the plate as if looking for salvation. The silence of the most expensive restaurant in the city was broken by a simple question, but the rumble was internal, inside Heitor. He saw in Vittoria something he hadn't seen in a long time, someone fighting tooth and nail for another human being. And there, in the reflection of that hungry baby's eyes, the millionaire saw his son, Pedro. The old pain became a bridge. He pushed the plate away, but it was his heart that he offered without realizing it. Life was about to leave him without armor, and he had no idea what was coming. Vittoria was not just another single mother fighting for survival. She was a warrior with tired eyes, but a soul on fire. At the Eleganza restaurant, surrounded by crystal glasses and judgmental looks, she knelt on the floor with the baby in her arms. She used a clean napkin as if it were a linen sheet. She fed Breno with such care that it seemed like a sacred ritual. She didn't beg or plead, she just cared. And that, my friend, was the reality check that Heitor Damasceno needed. Breno, as small as a flower bud, smiled a smile that tore through Heitor's chest. It was the same smile his son Pedro gave when eating mashed potatoes. It disarmed any defense. Vittoria, with her gentle and reverent gestures, taught without words that dignity has nothing to do with bank balance, but with presence, with dedication. And while everyone in the restaurant whispered, she only saw her son, and that said it all. And look, if there's one thing the world has been forgetting, it's that a mother's love is not measured by status, but by the intensity of the gesture. Vittoria didn't know it, but at that moment she was rekindling something in Heitor, the desire to feel, to love, to be useful to someone again. And if you've ever seen someone touch an emotional wound so lightly, you know that it changes everything. The millionaire began to see in her not just a woman, but a mirror of his own pain and a possible way out of loneliness. Overcome by a restlessness he couldn't name, Heitor left a sum of money on the table and followed Vittoria through the cold streets of the city. It was as if something bigger was guiding him. Perhaps the sound of Breno's crying, perhaps the emptiness she had unintentionally filled. He walked at a distance, observing every step of the woman who, even carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, maintained a firm posture. When he saw her get into an old car, converted into an improvised shelter, he was inescapably shocked. The reality of poverty was starker than any of his company's cost sheets. Vittoria slept there with Breno, surrounded by blankets, bags, and unbreakable love. She was dignified, even without comfort, and it was in this brutal contrast between the luxury that Heitor had and the dignity that Vittoria resisted that the need to act was born. He offered help, an apartment, food, support. But Vittoria, haughty and direct, made it clear she didn't want charity. That hurt more than any refusal to do business. It wasn't just about giving, it was about earning trust. Heitor then realized that helping was not as simple as writing a check. It was about building something with respect, listening and presence. He didn't want to invade, but to be a part of it. Vittoria didn't want a savior, but an ally. And that's where the big change lies, when the desire to help turns into the desire to understand. And from that point on, Heitor would no longer be just the lonely millionaire. He was about to be someone who truly cared. The apparent calm of that reunion between two worlds was broken when Breno began to cry, feverish and restless. Vittoria, in despair, felt her son's little body burn like embers. Heitor, seeing the panic in her eyes, took the wheel without thinking twice. He ran signals, made silent pleas, and drove as if his own son's life was at stake, because deep down maybe it was. It was the past trying not to repeat itself. It was the accident he couldn't avoid before, getting a new chance now. At the public hospital, reality hit harder than the fever. Neglect, bureaucracy, a cold and indifferent receptionist. Without health insurance, Vittoria was almost ignored. That's when Heitor stood up, not as a businessman, but as a man willing to do anything. He used his name, his weight, his public reputation as someone who builds buildings and makes donations. And it worked. Breno was treated in time, diagnosed with a serious ear infection. A few more hours, and it could have been irreversible. Meningitis, deafness. The fear that Vittoria had shown turned into silent gratitude. Heitor held her hand and for the first time felt like he was saving someone, and not with money, but with presence, with courage. And do you know what's most impressive? He, who for years had lived numb due to loneliness and family loss, began to feel alive there, in that hospital. Breno's fever gradually went away, but it ignited something irreversible in Heitor, a genuine desire to care for them, not out of obligation, but because, as he himself would say later, taking care of them reminded me of what it's like to be alive. When Heitor Damasceno took to the stage of the program Brazil in Focus, he was not the CEO, nor the millionaire that the country knew. He was the broken man trying to rebuild himself. He refused the press office script and decided to speak from the heart. He talked about Juliana and Pedro, about the accident, about the loneliness that turned him into a functional robot. In front of the cameras, he revealed his pain with an honesty that disarmed even the presenter. It was not a defense. It was a confession, and all of Brazil saw it. He didn't just explain himself. He firmly defended Vittoria. He said that she had never asked for anything, that she fought for Breno with a dignity he hadn't seen in years. He called her a symbol of hope, not an opportunist. He admitted that he needed them more than they needed him. That the single mother who approached him at the Eleganza restaurant didn't ask for alms. She asked for respect, and that this made him remember what it was to love. The internet, which minutes before had called him ridiculous, was now silent in reflection. On the other side of the TV, Vittoria was crying. She saw in Heitor a man willing to face the world for her and Breno, not as a savior, but as someone grateful for having been saved too. Public opinion turned upside down. The couple, who were not yet a couple, went from scandal to example. And that baby, who had only asked for food, had just become the bridge between two wounded souls. The interview not only cleared reputations, it rekindled faith in many people who no longer believed in new beginnings. The tide had changed, but Vittoria still had open wounds. An unexpected letter written by her Aunt Sonia brought up an uncomfortable invitation to visit her Uncle Marcos, now on the verge of death. He wanted to make amends. At first, Vittoria hesitated. After all, how could she revisit the home of someone who had rejected her while pregnant, humiliating her at her worst? But there was something that wouldn't leave her mind. Maybe Breno deserved to know her story, even if it was full of cracks. And Hater, of course, took her hand and said, "Let's go together." In that small town, where the streets held more eyes than trees, Vittoria discovered a secret that turned her roots upside down. Marcos was not her uncle. He was her grandfather. And Sonia, her grandmother. The two had hidden not only their true family identity, but also the inheritance left by Vittoria's parents. $200,000, corrected to more than $300,000, which had been improperly used to save the family store. It was theft, Marcos admitted with a choked voice. The stolen inheritance now came accompanied by a request for forgiveness. And there, in that simple room, the past collided with the present. Vittoria listened, cried, hesitated. But when she saw Breno smiling at his dying great-grandfather, something changed. She decided to forgive, not for those who hurt her, but for herself, for Breno, who deserved to grow up without inherited grudges. The reconciliation was silent and heavy, like all pain that is overcome with courage. Hator, by her side, understood that family is not always made up of blood alone. Sometimes it is made up of choices. And Vittoria chose to close the cycle, but the most surprising part of it was still to come. Months later, Vittoria's life was different. With her inheritance back, she went back to studying pedagogy. Breno, now 1 year and 5 months old, explored the house with wobbly steps and a vocabulary that only a mother would understand. Hator, faithful to his routine of affection and presence, took care of the bills and the family's heart. But what Vittoria didn't expect was that a simple trip to the park would turn into the most memorable moment of her life. The surprise was ready, and everyone already knew, except her. When he arrived at the place, he noticed familiar faces, neighbors, college friends, even his grandmother Sonia. Everything was orchestrated by Hator. And then, in the middle of the grass, he knelt down with Breno on his lap. "You asked me for leftovers? Today I want to offer you my whole life." Simple, direct, and with a ring that said more than 1,000 promises. Breno, all excited about the scene, shouted, "Daddy!" as if it were part of the script, and in a way it was. The entire park was moved. Vittoria said yes between sobs, laughter, and hugs. That single mother who once ordered a dish at the Eleganza restaurant now received a marriage proposal from the man she had unknowingly saved. Hator didn't just ask for a wife, he asked for a new chance to be a father, to be a man, to be whole. Their story began with crumbs and turned into a full meal, served with love, overcoming and reconciliation. But the real beauty of this journey? It was still just beginning. Some stories are not just meant to be watched, they are meant to be felt, lived, and above all, reflected upon. The journey of Hator Damasceno and Vittoria shows us that the greatest changes come from unlikely encounters, from choices made on the impulse of the heart. It is not every day that we see a millionaire abandon his ego to see the soul of a single mother on her knees, fighting for a spoonful of food with dignity. It is not every day that we witness love emerge where before there was only pain. This story invites us to step out of our bubble, to look with more empathy at those who society tends to ignore, to understand that true wealth is not in what is accumulated, but in what is shared. That true humanitarian aid is born from respect and connection, not from pity. And that forgiveness, even when filled with pain, can be the greatest gift we give ourselves. Vittoria forgave her grandparents, but she also freed herself. Hector found meaning again by giving of himself. And Breno just smiled, as if he knows that love is the only inheritance worth keeping. Now I make you a sincere invitation. If this story touched you in any way, leave a sentence, an insight, something that left a mark on you in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to believe again in the power of new beginnings. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, because here, every story has the potential to transform realities. And you can bet the next one could very well be yours.